Humans are weird. Would you like to hear a story about it? Hello, my wonderful viewers, and welcome to this episode of 22 Days of October Oddity. As you may or may not know, our adorable little spider alien friend quilx'tch has a campaign going on over on Indiegogo to get his research into human weirdness published. That is, he is ready to present over 60,000 words of the finest weirdness humanity has to offer. The link is below the video, so click on over and take a look. Buy a book. Now, on with the story. Humans are weird. What is a dog? An audio recording by Betty Adams. Looks like it'll be another rough day out there tomorrow, bub, Crichton observed as he sipped his coffee. Black, strong, and cheap as it could be bought. It was probably grown in a trash heap behind some factory in Chicago. If Bub had any opinion on the quality of his master's drink, he kept it to himself. His shaggy white head was pointed at the door of the small mountain cabin in seeming idle interest in the howling of the storm outside. Occasionally, his ears twitched at some squawk of the radio that was quietly muttering to itself on one of the rough shelves in the crowded room. The fire in the little pot-bellied stove crackled and thumped, and Crichton, a man who wore the title average with comfortable grace, got up to add another log to it. He had to move around a box filled with blankets and a pile of assorted bottles, nipples, and powdered milk, all stocked in anticipation of the arrival of several hundred new lambs that the mountain was expecting any day now. The fire tended to, Crichton turned his attention to Bub, who was whining softly and pawing at the door. Crichton arched his eyebrows and examined the shaggy white mass curiously. The dog's head was tilted to the side with curiosity, and there was the faintest sign of stress in the movement of the bushy tail and the knitting of the comical brown eyebrows. Crichton sighed and looked at the clock ticking away on the wall. 3 a.m. and a snowstorm roaring. If Bud needed help, there would be no way for Crichton to provide it to him out there. But you don't usually need help, do you, Bub? Crichton asked amicably, walking over to scratch behind Bub's perked ears. Bub waved his tail eagerly and let his tongue loll out of his mouth. Crichton sighed. He had just checked the ewes this morning, and none were nearer to lambing than 3 days, hopefully after the storm passed. If it were a wolf or a bear, or even a coyote, Bub would be snarling murder at the door. Well, here's to you just wanting to go sniff an odd fox, Bub, Crichton said as he set his shoulder to the rough-hewn plank door. It took a massive shove for a man who was neither small nor weak to even open the door against the force of the wind. But Bub was out into the storm in a leap, with nothing but glee in every fiber of his body. Crichton mused over what 40-odd years had taught him about sheep, chance, biology, and the ways of dogs and life, and sighed. Just in case, he told the clock as he moved to the piled supplies. He turned up the radio and let it fill the cabin with the mournful tones of Johnny Cash while he cleaned out the low-sided wooden box and laid it with battered but clean woolen blankets. He set a pot of water to boil on the stove and lined up 3 bottles and nipples in the bottle holder that leaned against one wall. If there was a lambing ewe out there, Bub would know what to do. If the lambs were strong, hale, and wanted, Bub would soothe the ewe and curl close to her side to keep it warm. If it were weak, sickly, or rejected, Bob would bring them to Crichton. Best to be prepared in any case. If a lamb was stillborn, well, Bub wouldn't leave anything to tempt the coyotes into developing a taste for mutton laying around. The radio fell silent for a moment in the middle of the Folsom Prison Blues, and Crichton glanced up in interest as the emergency alert flared. Highway 47 is closed from milepost 15 to milepost 32 through White Pass due to inclement weather. Alternate routes are available along Drift Creek Road and Green Butte Road, the announcer stated. Snow chains are now required down to 1,000 feet. A convoy carrying various diplomatic officials comprising of 3 black Chevy escorts has fallen out of contact, and residents are required to report any sightings in the closed area. The message was repeated a few times, and Crichton finished his preparations. He sat back down in his chair as Cash started singing again. As if struck by a sudden thought, he got up and pulled his smartphone out of a box on a shelf. He turned on the map function, assured it that it was no matter that there was no GPS signal, and traced his finger along the red stripe of the highway and then to the thinner black line of Green Butte Road. There were perhaps 10 miles between the nearest point of the road and the hanging valley that sheltered his cabin. Crichton shrugged and wrapped a blanket around his shoulders before turning down the lamp and settling into his chair. He was woken by the sound of scratching at the door and groaned as he untangled himself from the blanket. If there was no lamb, Bud would have barked to be let in. So much for sleep tonight. He wrenched the door open and closed it firmly behind the dog. He followed Bud sleepily to the lamb bed and knelt down, holding out his hands for the wee one. He didn't even fully open his eyes until Bub gave a low, frustrated growl. Crichton forced his eyes open and stared dumbly at Bub's mouth. "That," he said softly, "is no lamb." He staggered to his feet and turned the light to full power before returning to where Bub had placed the Something in the lamb bed. Well, it's something all right, Crichton said as he knelt by Bub. Something that is supposed to be alive. Crichton held the lamp over the tangle of drooping mop-like limbs. He hung the lamp on the wall hook and sat there for that purpose and reached out to gently untangle the creature. Bub whined in concern, but didn't try to interfere. The muscles were stiff, but not terribly cold. A few minutes of sorting out the mass revealed that the creature was longer than it was wide, and there was a pair of limbs that were a bit longer on one end and a bit rougher than all the others, as if from hard use. Around one of these there was a bracelet or ring or something that was intricately carved. Crichton eased it off and examined it. Ambassadors and Friends was etched around the inside. His brow knitted and he glanced sharply at the creature in the lamb bed. "What the flying scrap did you bring me, Bud?" Crichton demanded. "Or who?" He reached down and dug his fingers into the mass of appendages until he touched the core they were all attached to and frowned. He could feel no warmth. "Is it alive, Bub?" Crichton asked. Bub chuffed softly and nosed the creature. His tongue licked out and ran over the appendages. "I'll take that as a yes," Crichton said. He took the pot of water and mixed it with some of the ice-cold snow until it was just a little warmer than his hands. He eased the creature into the pot, making sure to leave the end with the longer appendages and the jewelry out to breathe. "I rather hope you breathe," he commented as he gently massaged the alien. "A diplomatic convoy, eh?" A thought struck him and he glanced up at the clock. It was almost 7. "How did you run 20 miles in 2 hours?" Crichton demanded of Bub. Bub waved his tail and slipped under a blanket that hung on the wall and led to the cooler firewood storage shed. Crichton sighed and continued his ministrations. After an hour, the alien began to move weakly. Soon, it was fighting to slip fully down into the water. Crichton kept the front end, at least he hoped it was the front end, out of the water until a disgruntled voice demanded, "Would you please let me hydrate properly, friend human?" The voice was odd, hollow in a way, and Crichton dropped the alien in shock. It hummed happily and began circling the bottom of a pot in an undulating motion. Crichton watched it circle for a moment and then shrugged and returned to his chair. He was just dozing off when the hollow voice sounded again, stronger this time. "Pardon my intrusion into your sleep cycle, friend human, but could I bother you to add more thermal potential to the miniature biome?" Crichton blinked dumbly at the massive appendage sticking out of the pot and ran the words over in his head a few times. He grunted and staggered up to add some more hot water from the kettle. The alien wriggled happily and scooted to the side as Crichton poured the hot water in. "Thank you, friend human," the alien said before submerging again. "Do I call you ambassador?" Crichton asked. The alien paused and poked its head out again. "Oh yes, that will do nicely. May I ask you a question?" "Sure thing, Ambassador," Crichton agreed. "How did you rescue me from that terrifying creature?" the ambassador asked, its voice becoming less hollow and stronger as it warmed up. "What terrifying creature?" Crichton asked. "The large hairy one with all the teeth," the ambassador said, waving his appendages in what Crichton guessed was supposed to be an explanatory manner. "Bub?" Crichton asked. On hearing his name, Bub stuck his head out of the flap and looked expectantly at Crichton. The ambassador gave a soft squawk and ducked back into the water. "Yes, that is the one I mean," the ambassador said, the voice sounding out from the pot's sides. "I didn't rescue you from Bub," Crichton said. "Bub rescued you from the storm and brought you to me for help." "I see," the ambassador said. "Is he quite safe?" "For you?" Crichton asked. "Sure, as long as you're my guest, he'll protect you." "I understand," the ambassador said. "Then perhaps I should bid you good night, my host. I must refresh my energy stores, but if you are willing, I would like to ask some questions about my rescue tomorrow." The ambassador dropped back down into the water and out of sight in the pot. Crichton blinked at him and idly wondered if this would all be a dream by dawn. He shrugged and sat back down in his chair. "You and me both," he muttered. "You and me both." And that is our dose of daily weirdness for today. If you found that you like what you heard, wander on over to Indiegogo and purchase a copy of Humans Are Weird. I have the data. The link is below. If you don't want to purchase the book or find you can't at the moment, share this around if you think it's worth sharing. Hit up Facebook, Tumblr, whoever. Hit that like button, hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next chapter.